And perhaps, do you want to start, Pierre, and then maybe you can take notes of the other names on the...
I can do that, yeah.
Oh, you can do that? Okay.
Okay, hi, so I'm Pierre Buttigieg. I'm the co-chair of the Semantic Technologies Committee under Lewis, and I'm also on the operations committee of the Oboe Foundry ontologies. I also run some of the linked data, let's say, developments, which have just started for the upcoming UNESCO Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And I work with UN Environment on semantic interoperability frameworks for the Sustainable Development Goals.
I'm John Graybiel at Stanford University. I work on the CEDAR and BioPortal projects there and help work on the core project here.
Simon Cox from CSIRO in Australia, a new ESIP member, partner, whatever they're called. A lot of ontology design.
Kai Blumberg, PhD student and developer for the environment ontology.
Perfect timing. Chuck Barterman, University of Notre Dame. I'm faculty in computer science and engineering and a computational scientist in the Center for Research Computing there.
Mark Schildhauer from UC Santa Barbara, the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis, and part of the semantics team on Data One and the NSF Arctic Data Center.
Ruth Doerr, Ronan Institute for Independent Scholarship. I'm not sure what I could call myself anymore, but I do somehow cryo-informatician. Oh man, that's a little rough for me.
Ilya Zaslavsky from UCSD. I lost any hope of putting a label on myself. Cryosemantician would work as well as any other.
Zachary Robbins, Community Fellow for the Semantic Technologies Committee and Forest Ecologist.
Jim Riley, I'm a software engineer technical lead at UNAVCO and working on the GIADIS EML project with GI.
Peter Fox API. And Lewis is in the front of the room.
Very good. Okay. So bear with me, folks. Sorry.
Right. I can read through the agenda points faster than I can type them. So then, just so there's an idea.
Yep.
Before we start.
One more person, which is Brandon and Zachary are both.
Yep, got them.
Brandon, do you introduce yourself?
Yes.
Oh, he did?
Well, earlier. Brandon, do you want to go and introduce yourself again, please?
Oh, sorry. Brandon Whitehead. I'm at Kebi and Popocatépetl. I'm a data scientist, allegedly.
Thank you. Zachary? Oh, okay. Sorry. Thanks, Zach.
Okay. Pierre, over to you.
Okay. So, right. I'll be typing them out, but just so that they're spoken first. Lewis and I put down a few points that we could discuss in this meeting. All are interesting, but it's just a question of where we'd like to go. So please keep them in mind. The first one is the role of the Semantic Tech Committee in ESIP in general. One of the ideas that was there is that we can provide consulting services to the other clusters in particular around their needs linked to semantics or linked data or FAIR, following the FRIEND principles, especially the I bit. So that would give us an opportunity to reach out to them and also to harvest knowledge from them. And that's a point to be discussed, what the strategy of that would be in the next year. Perhaps then even being activated in the next meeting, perhaps with the marine cluster or another. The second point would be a strategy to develop a growing presence within strategic target communities. So that could be the machine learning community. You know, they have some great data sets that they're putting together, and we can then demonstrate semantic technologies, activating those data sets further. Also, we have links to the drone cluster, as many of you have heard, and the marine data clusters. There are some emerging links happening there. So that's a chance. Again, a strategic chance to create, let's say, cluster-to-cluster relationships. It's related to one, but that's more thematic than it is technical. Sorry about the background noise if you're hearing that. If it's unbearable, let me know. Okay. Point number 3 is the strategy to pursue a suite publication. And that's an opportunity for us, not just to get out an academic article, but to really formulate the strategy of what we are as a group. One of the ideas put forward is that suite becomes the equivalent to Earth observations to what the Obo Foundry is to biological observations, to give this community a sort of natural home. And then the 4th point would be the continued engagement within the semantic harmonization and hackathon activities. So the cryo hackathon activities and the semantic harmonization that has just recently spun up. And in a sense, this is related to outreach. They're all intertwined really, but they're related to outreach activities, which we could do at meetings, but also more offline or remote attended hackathons that are thematic in the cryosphere and the lithosphere. So we'd have a litho hackathon, lithosemantics and hydrosemantics, etc. Just to continue that, because it's been very productive. The burden is not too much, and it's a good way to start getting people familiar with contributing knowledge. So those are the 4 things that are on the table. Whatever comes to mind. Perhaps, Lewis, you can do a show of hands where we'd like to start.
Okay, John first. Thanks, Pierre.
I have a question about number 3, the suite publication, or clarification perhaps. In our previous discussion, there was quite a bit of angst about the overlap between suite and core, the community ontology repository. And I just want to clarify, unless I'm wrong, that or identify that as something to be factored in as you think about publishing about just suite, how that is kept, how that's distinguished from the community's perspective from the work of the committee as a whole. So just a heads up to you since you weren't on the earlier meeting. And I guess it's probably just a personal bias, but the community ontology repository is an unusual thing in ESIP in that it's in direct conflict with the way Carl Benedict presents ESIP at the beginning of the meeting to new members, where he says they don't actually run any repositories or systems. And the core is a system that ESIP runs in some sense.
Was that mentioned at the beginning of this entire meeting?
What Carl said was for the new members at the new members banquet.
Is that right?
It's part of their standard slides for many years.
Well, that's just wrong.
It's different now, I think.
Okay.
But I think the reason I'm bringing all that up, sorry for so much time, is that I think core maybe is a little bit more of a significant thing than the agenda items indicate, and maybe deserves a little bit more focus. Not necessarily in this meeting, just as for the semantic committee. I think it should be an active sort of business review activity in some sense.
Yeah,
so
there's a portion of that as well that, you know, some of these points here are that what we're doing, which is not uncommon at ESIP, is we're rolling out essentially efforts which should become their own project outside of the Semantic Technologies Committee. I think that's important that these efforts get given due attention outside of the committee, and that the other people that want to take them in different directions can go and do that. Semantic harmonization is the example. Core is an example. The science on schema.org/geosciences rollout is an example. These have all happened within the last, I would say, 2 years, which is fantastic that these efforts are actually seeing the light of day outside of the Semantic Technologies community. So I think just recognition of that today, you know, is great. But I don't think the core should kind of dominate too much of the time here, because what we're trying to do, I think, is set a strategic vision for the next 6 months between now and the winter meeting as to what the hell we actually do with semantic technologies moving forward. Seeing is that in this meeting again, we've seen a growing emphasis from a wider community on the role of data semantics and the work that they do. So I think the next step here was for us to really try and open this up and see where does the audience want to focus some time on first. Do you want to talk about, 1, 2, 3, or 4, I suppose it is. First one being Semantic Tech's role in ESIP is some kind of transforming us into this kind of consultant role where we target communities and we provide strategic input into those communities. Ongoing work has been in the machine learning community. There's this whole thing about, we've got loads of labels, we've got some comments for some of these labels. How can machine learning then pick these labels up and use them and use the labels in the work that they're doing? That there would be an excellent opportunity for us to act as council to try and drive that work forward. The other work that we've been doing, I think, is over in the drone data API work, where we've been providing, additional support for that community moving forward. Do you guys want to discuss that? Do you want to discuss other partnerships, which are kind of, I think, builds into number 2? Do you want to pursue a topic of conversation right now on the proposed suite publication, or do we skip to number 4? So who's for number 1? Who's for number 2? We've got a few here. Who's for number 3? Suite publication. 2. Who's for number 4? Continued engagement with rollout clusters. I think we've got 4 for that. 4, 5, 6. Okay, we're starting there. So number 4, where do we start here and who do we have representation from? We've got representation from semantic harmonization, drones, anybody from, well, we have core, but we discussed that in the last session. I think we could probably move on. Is there anybody else that's here? Microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just commenting that I agreed with Adam to be the co-chair of that cluster, the science and schema,
Perfect.
whatever, geoschemas. So
Perfect. So what is it exactly? Is it called geoschemas?
I think it's called geoschemas, but I'm not sure that that's really, I think we have to decide what that name really is.
Okay, good.
Right?
Well, I mean, the great thing about that is it gives us less work directly here, right?
Well, yeah, and it's, yeah.
And it takes a whole bunch of people away as well. That's the bad part.
Wait.
Nah. Okay.
Man, you figured me out pretty quickly. That's
yeah, there was a few of us. Combined effort. No, I'm only kidding on. Okay, so that's where we're starting. We've got representation from the geoschemas. We've got representation from semantic harmonization, both online and in the room. We've got representation from machine learning up the back here. I don't see why we couldn't maybe try and put down with maybe 10 or 15 minutes to each of those efforts where we kind of go forward. There is an open thread. I just want to get this out of the way quickly. There's an open thread on the Semantic Technologies mailing list, which relates to number 3, which is the suite publication. So if we spend more time getting conversation out of the way on these other topics and you're passionate about that, then just please respond to that thread with where you think we should submit it, and we'll start getting the ball rolling on number 3. Semantic Technologies mailing list. Yeah. Okay, so let's just go. This is literally around the room here. On my left-hand side is Chuck, who's on geoschemas. We're moving around to Ruth, which is going to be semantic harmonization, and then I think we'll go up the back to machine learning. If there's no barriers to that, then we'll just kind of keep the train moving here. So,
sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay, great, fantastic. Can we get a microphone to Chuck, please?
I was gonna say, people go to the front to speak, since they're going to be talking for a few minutes.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Actually, that's a great point. If you'd like to try and build the relationship between what you're currently doing and the role of semantic technologies and what you're currently doing, let's just maybe try and do this ad hoc, come up and pitch for 5 minutes, and we'll try and get down maybe, a handful of points as to where we can take things. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Okay, was that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Right, Chuck, over to you.
This is so this is sort of a continuation of a conversation between Adam, Doug, and myself in the hallway of, okay, well, there was sort of an agreement that this needed to exist. What do we do now? So this is a 2-day sort of conversation, but I mean, we sort of figured that there's a couple different thrusts, right? So the first sort of thrust is, and people have been stopping me in the hallway here that are repository maintainers, and they're having real trouble figuring out how mechanistically we implement schema.org. How do we build templates that do this? How do we, connect to our databases? How do we actually do the bits and pieces that Adam and Doug have figured out parts of? So we think that a developer thrust, tools, how do you actually in practice do this, right, is one of the components of what we're thinking of for whatever the science on schema / geoschemas. And I think they're actually going to be two different things. So the first one is the science on schema.org. I think we want to continue that repository in ESUB space. I think that we want to continue to build on little snippets of JSON-LD, for examples of how to populate a JSON-LD snippet with dataset information. How to, if you're an organization, how do you publish yourself as an identity that's web dereferenceable, right? And extend out those examples. And then as my talk, I was trying to get to on Wednesday, that there's sort of some fundamental missing pieces in schema.org that are necessary for earth sciences. And so geoschemas would be the sort of bioschemas equivalent to that. And I think that in the next 6 months, there would be sort of mechanistic discussions, because Adam and I sat down and started trying to figure out if we could even find the bioschemas context JSON-LD. As it turns out, it's not dereferenceable. So we can get it in GitHub, but it's not dereferenceable for the bioschemas site, right? And their namespace, it's defined relative to the bioschema site. So I think we want to get input and getting that part right, and how geoschemas in and of itself would work, right? And take a few example entities, probably starting with this idea of research site, place, and probably some of the other concepts related to that observable property, I think, is an important thing, how that fits to place, and how we would do both alignments to things like SOSA, things like Suite. How do you build those sorts of additional properties, additional type sorts of things like have been built in schema.org. So those are sort of the activities that I see going on in that cluster. I mean, the conversation obviously is a natural one back to the Semantic Tech Committee because of the expertise in doing these sort of modular alignments, doing maybe a shackle constraint also that is published along with the JSON-LD context, right? So people can do some validation against it. And also, where the heavy lifting should be. So this idea of observable property, I like, the slide that Simon put up and I actually stole and put up in my talk, right, on a little bit of feedback on testing. Ooh, okay, I think we're okay. So it seems to me that there's a ton of observable properties in Suite that might be an interesting alignment module to publish in the alignments directory of, start to populate the things that, particularly with respect to, we're working as part of the CI/COE with Neon, and they have, relative to their sites, same sort of thing that Simon sort of showed, all of these observable properties. And so it would make it very easy for them to basically say in their landing page, this is the observable property over here in Suite, and because it is an observable property, then you can follow your nose to more formal definitions of those things. So those were sort of along the lines of what we were thinking.
Okay.
Have I gone past my 5 minutes yet?
No. I was just going to mention, Chuck, it sounds like in terms of that's what that community plans to do. In terms of us acting as a role to support where necessary, it sounds as if a lot of this stuff probably won't be flushed out for at least a few months.
Correct.
So between now and the winter meeting, we may actually have limited input into how we build and contribute towards that effort.
Yep.
Okay. So that's not to say we won't do anything. What it is to say is that we put an item in our committee business meeting moving forward, that we try and have an update from what's been going on there. And
much as we've given this sort of list of things here that could be, engagement points with other communities, the thing that I just gave you is a list of possible engagement points. We have to have our first meeting to decide what it is we're doing, right? So, and how much interest there is in people.
Thanks, Chuck. Okay, Ruth. So it sounds as if we potentially have limited input in the short term into what goes on there. Not because nothing's going on, but just because it sounds as if you guys need to do work, get the ball rolling, and then we find right. Okay.
I have to note that Pierre could do this as well as I could. So this is all about the semantic harmonization cluster. We've been holding monthly calls initially geared towards aligning suite and ENBO, while also adding the work that I did on the Global Cryosphere Watch glossaries to that. And we've been doing it on these monthly telecons, about 2 hours a month or something like that. So you don't get very far in any given one, but eventually you will eventually get to the entire suite. At the moment, all we've been doing is doing a lot of the work in ENVO and writing up what needs to happen to suite as issues. And I personally always thought of that as part of the semantic committee. It became its own cluster just because it had separate calls, and it was convenient to have ESIP support for all of that. And I will admit that once we get past the cryosphere, I think we've completed one of 100 files or something. Then the question is can we attract people from some of the other communities, hydro, geo, geologists, those sorts of things, to provide sort of the kind of domain expertise that would be needed, because I certainly am not going to cover all of those areas. And I do note that we've been pretty successful at bringing other cryo folks into some of our telecons, and that I personally think that that's great. So
I wonder if there's a possibility. I wonder if there's a possibility to move next to potentially marine. The reason I'm saying that is because I get the feeling that the marine data cluster at ESIP is looking for some sort of immediate purpose and where they can grow and kind of align.
Yeah, maybe I could comment on that. Yeah, I could comment on that. So we have a little bit of reach out over this ocean best practices system we developed for UNESCO, which uses ontologies in the background. We already contacted the head of the marine cluster, so Jay Perlman and myself. That's more about the Ocean Obs conference coming up, this once a decade conference, and also about the upcoming Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. But in that, we can certainly say that this can start up as an activity, and they're interested. They're interested in linking up data, and that also fits in very well with what UNESCO is calling for, this integrated data working group to feed in. So I think marine is the next thing that can do, and I can also dedicate quite a bit of my time to that since I'm in a cryosphere and marine institute. So maybe strategically it just makes sense.
Me too. Okay, we'll get a hands up from Kai as well.
Works great for me.
Okay, well, it sounds as if that might be the next best move then, is to try and.
And actually, even better. Sorry, Lewis, just excited. No the melatonin is kicking in, and so I'm like, slurring. It's horrible, and it's this is mixing with a Bloody Mary. I don't know what to do. Anyway, So, but this also fits in well with what Adam Shepard started up. They sponsored a meeting in Dublin with NERC, the vocabulary server there. You know, these huge marine vocabularies in SCOS, and the Marine Institute in Ireland. And we're doing a little activity aligning ENVO and those vocabularies. So I think it all works out quite well. Things are happening there.
Okay. Thanks for the context. Okay, well, it sounds as if that might, you know, that would be the next best move, and that's not going to happen over, you know, a month or two. That's going to be probably a sustained 6 to 12 month effort, I'd imagine, as well. Okay. Third, Anne, do you want to come up and I know I don't want to put you in the spot. If you don't want to come up, it's okay. What we're trying to do here is really to determine what's the next step for us to try and address this issue over at machine learning, because this came up on Monday, that we have rich knowledge sources available to us. We have enough people that know enough about these knowledge sources. And an artifact, just ontologies, vocabularies, we have these underlying knowledge sources which formalize things that we work with. And right now there's this open-ended, whether it's a research problem or kind of a more practical problem that's been worked on here just now, is how we integrate and infuse all the labels and all of these terms that we have, the concepts, with practical machine learning applications. That there is as far as I understand, is an open issue that people at ESIP really have got to grips with over the last maybe while. I'm not involved in machine learning, so I don't know how long people, I know they've been wanting to do it for a long time, but I think they're starting to get to grips with, you know, how do we, what software do we need in order to facilitate that? And I think that the Semantic Technologies Committee could play an influential role in breaking down the barriers to machine learning experts accessing a lot of these labels. That's where I think we could play a valuable role. I'm getting the thumbs up from Anne, so it sounds as if, because we're not trying to do machine learning as part of the Semantic Technology Committee. Maybe some people are. I'm certainly not. What I think I would like to try and facilitate is exactly, you know, opening that entire rich knowledge source up to then be used in practical applications over in the machine learning side. Chuck?
Yeah, so I just want to comment that I think, so this comes from discussions at AAAI had a symposium on knowledge representation, machine learning combinations, right? So this is the more researchy side of this, right? And so, you know, part of this is how do you load knowledge graphs into a feature vector sort of representation? So a tensor, logic tensor network, or one of these other sort of RESCAL or trans-E, trans-R, these sort of things that were designed to hold these graph relational data, not necessarily just labeled data like you would use for a convolutional neural network that was looking through images, right? So the network can actually access relationship information as versus just a flat label, which it doesn't care what the flat label is. It just cares that it's different, right? So I think there's some tools that have been released that might be an interesting, you know, collaboration to try. So there have been, you know, as I mentioned to you yesterday, you know, Facebook has released, you know, Big Graph, which is essentially a collection of all these algorithms that you can load essentially knowledge graph structures into, right? That then produces a neural network version of the knowledge graph that then becomes sort of a natural sort of representation. So I think that might not be a bad place to start, is to see how to change from our natural sort of representation of the knowledge graph into the machine learning representation. How does that work? I think that might be an interesting discussion to start.
Okay. Yep. That would happen, I think, down at the machine learning cluster level, right? The other area which the machine learning cluster has been doing well in as well, the ESIP Labs has been doing well in, is attracting projects which at their foundation are either directly related to machine learning or kind of more generally artificial intelligence. I think that is another role where Semantic Technologies could get in early and provide guidance on what services we have available what expertise we have available, tooling that has been used more widely across our community, and things like this. So I don't see why. And by the way, it was also mentioned that for the next symposium that we put on, that we maybe actually have, rather than inviting commercial companies operating in the commercial space, that we actually invite labs projects to brief us on what's been happening, the bridging the barrier, bridging the gap between machine learning and data semantics, because some of these labs projects, that's exactly where they're at just now. And I think that we can't expect
I think that's.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Finish, Lewis.
I was going to say, we can't expect Amazon and Microsoft and Google to come with these use cases and to solve problems that we have, because it's not our responsibility to teach Amazon and Google how to solve the problems that we're struggling to solve. Whereas it's most likely there's an increased possibility or likelihood that labs projects are much more tightly associated with the type of representative problems that members of our community come forward with. So, some of these things are kind of tied together. But okay, and I think,
could I interject there?
Yes, of course, Pierre.
Yep. So on that, I totally agree. I think we need to get it down to what people are actually doing to have another prong at engaging the ESIP community and getting people used to these technologies and complementing ML with ontology. I think one point that we have to put forward is to remember that knowledge representation is another branch of artificial intelligence. You have ML for heavy data, where you have a lot of people talking about the same things in the same way, and knowledge representation, where you need a bit of stability, where your data does not support you. You need to go directly to the knowledge. And when you have those two things to help complement each other, your applications can go further. So I think that conceptual point has to be made so that it's clear that we do complement each other as committees and as clusters. And that's how we should perhaps approach new projects. And I think the lab idea is a great one.
Mm-hmm. I've got two questions. One question is for Anne, and the next question is actually for Peter. So the first question, Anne, would be, does this kind of stuff, does it align with, I think, where the machine learning cluster is kind of going? Can we get a microphone, please? Or eating.
Excuse me, chewing. Well, I guess all I can say is that we have some foci, how do you say that, already, and what we, and people who have time and interest in those things. So I want to keep those moving, and we've got momentum on that. So it's certainly within the scope of the cluster. The question is, are there individuals who are interested in, pursuing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds maybe a step that we could take to realise what the participation would be is maybe for us to pitch the concept at one of the next machine learning meetings, to gather general feedback on that and take it from there. Again, we're not expecting, with any of these initiatives, we're not expecting, next week when we all go home, that we're going to start seeing, artifacts churned out and everything's going to be great. This is over the next 6 months. But I think if we could, in the next machine learning meeting or the one after that, whenever, and we could post it to the mailing list beforehand so people come with the knowledge that this is potentially what's going to be pitched, and then we can have a think about who would be interested in taking it forward.
I totally support that. I totally support pitching ideas regularly, because people sort of come and go, and you never know what's going to stick with someone. And so, yeah, that sounds good.
So there's another thing here which I think we've missed out on in years past, which is having workshops, practical workshops, more regularly. Once a year, when we're calling it a symposium, it's over before you really know what's happened. It ends up a very long day. It's the day before ESIP starts, and we put a lot of preparation into it, but it's over very, very quickly. I'm going to propose that we have another symposium at the winter meeting coming up. And, you know, potentially we could go to various places and try and see if there's an appetite for even more regular workshops than that. I think maybe every quarter, if we could, even if it's a remote workshop, then, you know, I don't think that would be a bad thing. It's because a lot of these efforts require us to come together and share our ideas. And one of the best way we can do that is through these practical workshops, in my opinion.
I second that, and I second that in terms of the remote attendance. I mean, obviously, being in Europe, it simplifies things, and the cryo hackathon speaks to the effectiveness of that. And
Yeah,
I think then the symposia are opportunities for us to give status reports and more aligned strategy on who we need to talk to, and invite those people to, number one, see what we're up to in a practical sense, to see that there's sustained activity, and then you know, hopefully get them to participate. I like that idea.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, thank you to whoever or whomever the people are online scribing this stuff. I really appreciate that. Chuck?
Yeah, I was actually going to echo that. That was actually what I was going to say, more or less, other than I think it needs to be clear that what you're proposing over those quarters, right, are sort of hackathons which have, you know, a well-defined topic, you know, people that are going to be involved in it. So that and you know that they'll be there. They're scoped very well, that something can be accomplished. So it's not just sort of an open-ended thing or an information, you know, session, but the idea is that we want to do something concrete that then could feed back into these other sorts of things. And the cryo hackathon is one very concrete example of how that process worked out.
Yeah,
so
I think you guys have got an excellent model for that, and it's, you know, it's clearly working. So, okay, John. Oh, you're right. Okay, okay, folks. Anything more than that, I think, you know, I just don't think we have the people power to facilitate anything more than that. That is a huge roster of work to undertake. You know, especially given the fact that it's going to be over the next 6 months. I think it's a lot of work.
Luis, was that focusing on machine learning or on?
That last part was on machine learning, interaction with the machine learning cluster. Yeah. Okay. One question here, John. Ilya.
Question, are there specific machine learning scenarios or setups that you have in mind? And maybe we can, because there may be a range of things that people can do with machine learning and semantics.
I absolutely agree.
Preferred things that people have been thinking about?
This whole scenario just now of just bridging the gap between the availability of labels, rich curated labels, in order to tag, classify, segment imagery or some other curated data set. That there, I think, is the primary problem space on the table just now. Other lists, and I think they should be tabled over with the machine learning cluster. But that immediate scenario is where I think that we can provide value, because we know about all the labels. We produced all these labels. We curate and maintain all these labels. Machine learning cluster doesn't. Well, not the ones which are available within the ESIP, for example, within core or within the marine metadata repository or within BioPortal. Machine learning cluster most likely didn't work on those labels. Chuck?
Yeah, just an observation that in addition to that, one of the other sort of things I've heard over and over again are agents and question and answer agents that can do natural language processing and then pull information from a knowledge graph or a knowledge base, right, to answer those questions. Think of Alexa, think of Google Assistant, right?
Yep.
And there are a bunch of published tools, right, which could be experimented with. So that could also be another topic, which would also demonstrate to domain experts that I can formulate a question, you know, in a natural language and get at least some response. It will be kind of, you know, dicey because these tools are at least the tools that are open source are a little, I mean, they're research tools, right? But I think demonstrating the utility of, you know, there's this one tool that, you know, can be trained to treat Sparkle as a natural language, right? And so you can train it on types of competency questions that a domain expert might ask of that knowledge graph, and then it basically then formulates the Sparkle query that could answer that question. I think it's tools like that that could also help bridge the gap.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I agree there, and also realizing that the ontology artifacts themselves are networks. And if you're using graph theory in analytics, also when you're teaching machine agents about concepts and they form graphs of association, that can be aligned with graph topology and boost regions where there isn't enough data. So there's actually they are actually computational objects. So that's certainly another angle we can take. I have to run to the gate pretty soon. Just as a comment, in the notes I put a little excursus at the bottom with some reference to the United Nations stuff that was in the agenda or the session description, as well as these concepts of essential biodiversity variables, essential ocean variables, which are linked to the essential climate variables run by WHO and others. These are coming. These are the variables that will be used for planetary status reports by governments and others. Some are more advanced than others, but we have inroads to those, largely through ENVO, but certainly this connects then with this community. And I just put those notes down because I see that we need the ESIP community there. Right now, it's just a few people, and it really needs community support for global challenges. It can't be just a small group. So that's more like a strategic thing to consider for perhaps the next year or so, when we are engaging with the clusters like the Marine Cluster or any others. If we can then build the crosslinks to those communities, and I can facilitate that, we can then have a little bit of an impact and a voice as a defined ESIP semantic tech committee or community in general at those tables. So that's just a note there to think about. And if you have any links to that, in your own work, or you come across people who are trying to interface with the SDGs or anything of that nature, please let us know about it, and we can try to develop that link a little bit more. But otherwise, I'll have to run in a couple of minutes. Anything urgent for me to respond to, Lewis, do you think?
Right now, I don't think so, Pierre. I think you've been instrumental in trying to drive forward with a roadmap for where we want to go, and have a safe flight. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys. I'll see you hopefully next meeting, but at least online somewhere or someplace we'll meet certainly. All right. Have a nice meeting, everyone, and safe travels back home, wherever they may be.
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks. Bye. Okay. Please carry on.
One very specific challenge that we have with machine learning and semantics, in our setup, we have a bunch of documents that are automatically tagged with keywords that reference semantics. And we have a way to validate or invalidate these assignments. We would need to have actually an army of people to go through that and actually do that validation or invalidation, so that we can then send it to machine learning and learn from it. So I don't have anyone in mind, but perhaps that would refer to item 2 that we had on the agenda as a way to outreach to other parts of ESIP and impress them with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that there would be ripe, I think, for a workshop style event, a regular workshop style event.
Given the number of terms in the ontology, it will not take one. It will take longer.
Yes, absolutely. A regular workshop, something similar to what's happening with the semantic harmonization cluster, but specifically focused on this document annotation issue. But that again, that would need to be. I think that would be us. That there requires exploring and then locating individuals that are interested in that particular application. I don't think that'd be too difficult. I think it's quite a common requirement. So I would encourage you to try and pursue that. I mean, even posting to the mailing list and finding out what's the appetite for that within the community, I would say that's the best first start. So what I did want to mention here, folks, as well, is that Peter had presented, I think it was in September or October time last year, towards the end of last year. It was the roadmap that the Semantic Technologies community at ESIP had produced a decade ago, or maybe more than a decade ago, okay? And it was really interesting to actually look at that and see where we were currently with that. I'm not going to put Peter in the spot and ask him to rehash what he's already done. The real interesting part about that I thought was, it wasn't just, This was the impressive part. It wasn't just the visionary strategy that they had then and the roadmap that they had at the time. It wasn't just the fact that they quite clearly understood the capabilities and more importantly, the limitations at the time of the technology stack. But it was the fact that they did understand that a lot of this stuff would be realized over, a duration of time. And I think there are portions of the work that we currently have achieved and that we continue to do, which really move towards achieving that grander vision, because that vision was formalized as well, which is something that we have here in text, but it was a presentable formalization that they had. And I think it was if you haven't checked that out, the slides are linked to from the wiki. And I strongly encourage you to have a look at those slides and follow up with anybody if you've got any questions about it. But I just did want to mention that the larger vision for this stuff, we're splitting it into 6-month chunks now, but I think that we're gradually getting more towards where that vision was. I just wanted to mention that. So where do we go with the rest of the meeting here? We've discussed, I think, the first part, which is what's a strategy for connecting and growing our community within ESIP. We still have the following agenda items which are tabled. Give me a break. Give me a break.
Simon's trying to be funny.
We're able here to talk about whatever. And Ruth, maybe you're going to do that.
Yeah. So I was looking at number 3.
Yes.
And I really take to heart somebody's questions there about core versus suite, because really those are two different things.
Absolutely.
And core needs to be advertised. And one of the reasons why I'm putting the resource registry stuff in core is because I figure if I don't, nobody ever will.
Yep.
So I really am going to do that, unless it goes away, which, well, I walked in at an inopportune time to the previous meeting.
Can I show something directly on that? Okay, I see the only real part mention of core in a suite publication is the following information. This is the suite wiki, by the way, on GitHub. It is suiteontology.net. It's this stuff here. It's basically how we get from suiteontology.net to the resource and where's that served from. This is really, I see, the only real part that we need to explain, which is how we do redirects, dereferencing, how we do dereferencing and how that's facilitated. That's all we need to talk about for core. The rest of the stuff we're talking about is entirely suite. It's a suite publication, right? They're two completely separate things. If we want to talk about core as a technology stack and submit it to a journal somewhere else, which is in computer science or in software engineering or whatever, then let's do that. I don't want to bastardize a publication which is, I think, could potentially, right? It's content a suite and
So that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And actually, there are places that would publish, basically descriptions of a technology and why it exists and what it's for, and I think it's very worthwhile for ESIP to do that.
Yep. Yes.
So I'm recommending that those two things get kind of split.
Okay, I strongly support that. The other thing here is for a suite publication. Really, what I think it's appropriate to do is for us all to review the Raskin and Pan publication in 2005, which described suite, originally, and to kind of dedicate a bit of, dedicate recognition to that, and what's happened since that publication. We're over 10, we're 14 years. It will be 15 years by the time if we do get a publication out. So 15 years on from the original publication of suite, how do we describe that as a community and where does that go? I think that would be a very appropriate community generated document, which, you know, I would imagine would be quite attractive to some of these forums. John?
I like the idea a lot, and it would be, if we're imagining doing that, thinking about that maybe in 2020, maybe even in alignment with the 50-year anniversary of whatever it is.
Right.
Earth Day, thank you.
Yeah.
That actually works very well.
Yeah.
We could look at the citations of Suite over the years and try to get some of those people, many of those people, to participate, attend, contribute, and it might be quite a powerful testimonial.
Absolutely, absolutely. So anyway, that was on topic 3. I think there's definitely enough interest from the emails I've received personally, responses to the suggestion that we put something together. I think this is something that we've all been thinking about for a while anyway, right? I mean, everybody's been thinking about it, but I think just formalising it. Loads of people emailed me directly saying, I think I'd like 7 or 8 people emailed me last night saying would be interested to contribute. So the aim here would be for us to really have, you know, a reasonably extensive authorship list. And of course, you know, we bring in potential, or we bring in users and people who had cited in the past. There's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done as well over, and Suite has been cited and used.
Ruth is saying it's been cited 52,000 times.
Yeah. So, and it's been
52,000 entries in Google Scholar.
Yeah, it's been used extensively in OGC documentation as well, by the way, for standard. There's a lot of stuff there, and some of that stuff, yeah, some of it.
Simon's being funny again.
Yeah. The point I was trying to make, Simon, I mean, that, you know, that was a fair point, but the point I was trying to make was the fact that the examples, some of these examples use the old versions, which is the suite.jpl.nas.gov, and I think it's our responsibility to update that stuff as well. I've actually been approached to do that, and I've not got around to doing it.
There's also a perception, right? So if I talk to people, you know, and they say, "Oh, I looked at Suite, I grabbed the alpha, I couldn't make heads or sense of it." It's like, have you looked at the new GitHub repo? What GitHub repo? Like, oh, well, you know. So I think that also from the perspective of getting something out there, that there is something that's changed, and maybe you should look at it again because it may now more, you know, fully meet your needs.
Yeah, fair point, fair point. Okay, I think that's kind of hashed that one out. This is going to be something, again, you know, between now, I think this is something that we could, you know, we can basically start work on. We could start working this next week. There's no reason why we couldn't. And I think between now and the winter meeting, we should try. John?
Well, what about a session at AGU, not this year because it's too soon, but next year?
Well, we've already submitted a session for our community ontology engineering workshops, exact same as we did at ESIP this week, that we can easily, exactly, we can use. That's why I submitted that, was because I thought if things went okay at ESIP this summer, then potentially we can just use that exact same. We can roll out the same format for the AGU meeting. It's not been accepted yet, but subject to, you know, being accepted, then, you know, we can roll out the same thing.
I was actually thinking this year's AGU would be too soon for the kind of all hands on deck, all 360-degree view of Suite that might be appropriate for aligning with Earth Day and with 15 years and all of that. That could be much more of a celebration and a, you know, attention grabber.
Okay.
As it were.
Well, I mean,
something to think about.
We crowdsource the agenda for that workshop, and, you know, we see what people are interested in beforehand. Kind of similar to what we did with the machine learning workshop as well. Okay, so that's item number 3. Item number 4, continued engagement and rollout of clusters. You know, I think we started with that one. Item number 5 is planning for the next Semantics Symposium. This year, Anne, Beth and I, you know, took over, you know, well, not took over, you know, took on more or just less the logistics, and, you know, tried to pull together everything that happened for Monday of this week. What I will be doing is following that up. I'm not saying everything went perfect, and I'm not saying it was appealing to everybody that went there. But what I would like to try and do is get feedback on what that was. So I'll be following up probably on my way home later this afternoon with an email to everybody that attended, just to say, to provide us with some feedback as to what they would like to see the next time or whatever. But if you're interested in being part of planning for the next meeting, if you have suggestions which you would attend another event similar, and you have suggestions for how that event would go, or if you're interested in presenting at that meeting, again, the topic would probably be harmonization between machine learning and data semantics within earth sciences and earth science informatics. Then reach out to us and we can facilitate that without a doubt. Growing this effort is where I think is what we're trying to do here. So I don't have much more. We're at 12:45. We've been going for an hour. I don't have much more to add at this point. I think we've definitely got enough work for 6 months, and we've got a strategy for how to kind of execute that work. Is there anything the folks online or in the room would like to bring forward to discuss? Anything at all? I've got nothing in the room. Anything online? I'll let you bump in if you would like to online. No problem. John?
I don't think we have a representative from USIP here at the moment, but it may be just me. I find myself missing the semantic meetings a lot because the notice tends to come out the night before and I see it the next morning after it's already happened.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm wondering if, I suspect this is not the only team that has that issue.
Right.
I'm wondering if we can look at automating some emails from
like a week beforehand. Boom.
No, a day beforehand. 24 hours, 36 hours. What? It is. It is. No, I don't know how to do that. It is. It's totally the problem. But part of the thing that I can't automate in my Mac is knowing what we're going to talk about and maybe even contributing to what we're going to talk about. So the ideal cycle is, here's the tentative agenda that comes out 3 or 4 days before. I can add to it.
I get it. What I have tried to do this
but it's
year,
hard for everybody.
Yeah, what I've tried to do this year, John, was 1 week before. I have a reminder in my calendar to send out an updated agenda, but also to call for anybody that receives the email that wants to table something is to contribute it to the agenda. We have recurring items on the agenda, which now are core updates, semantic harmonization updates, will be science on schema.org updates, and any updates from in our communities that people are reaching out to, that type of thing. That's a recurring item on the agenda now. So we've made some changes to the agenda to try and accommodate that, and just generally to make everybody more aware of the things that are happening and where we're having an impact. But point taken, John. No, point taken, absolutely. So I would like to say very quickly about budget for the committee and stuff for next year. I believe we have an annual budget of, I wish Beth was here because I didn't know too much about this. I think it's maybe $10,000 that we have for the year. Yes, we do have a fellow, Zach. Zach's right in front of you, right in front. Yes.
We also, I see he's a person here, so Peter just came in.
Yes.
So when we started talking about establishing this cluster,
yes,
numbers were bandied about that were considerably more than 10,000 a year.
Right. Okay.
And
15 grand maybe.
50 was the number that was bandied about. Now, I'm not saying it was a commitment. I'm not, no issue like that. What I'm saying is that the money that gets allocated to clusters can very much be a function of the justification and budget that the cluster submits, in my understanding of the way SIP works.
Yeah.
And so
Peter's going to chime in here as well.
So I'll just throw in my 2 cents, which is, it bugged me a lot that we didn't think hard about what value proposition we could get with more than $10,000. And I would like us to do it differently.
Yep, I agree with that, John.
As former president of ESIP, I know the answer to this question. There is a formal process, and it goes through the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, and there are requirements around it. And when we created this committee, and that's really important because you're in a different status to the other entities inside ESIP. We would start the early sense was don't give us too much money too soon because we really are not quite sure what we would do.
Yep.
And we don't do that to turn you into sort of like a granting organization, a mini grant. So that was small, and the idea was that over time you get a sense, and sort of core at the time was in the test bed, and so there were other mechanisms to fund things that were really semantic web and semantic tech. But now, the test bed's morphed into the lab.
Yep.
It's a different process. And so I would absolutely encourage you. And 5.0 is the standard number.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if you can get up there immediately.
Yep.
Simply because the budget's been set already for the next year.
Yep.
But you want to get in touch with the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, because they can show you other committees' requests, what they look like, because there's a reporting requirement, there's an evaluation requirement, all the stuff you would expect if you're going to get that much money.
Absolutely, Peter. Okay, really helpful. And the point here that we can take from that is that there's room for growth and expansion of ESIP support and the things that we want to do as a community. We provide a rationale for how some of the initiatives that we're working on have wider applicability outside of our community, and we approach the right, we navigate through the right channels in order to try and facilitate them. And I look forward to that as well, because I can think already, the Us Semantics Symposium, bumping that up to twice a year, I think would be an excellent way to move forward. As a very, very, that's an immediate thing that we could do. And it's a positive thing. So I think maybe even the first meeting that we have back, we should focus on this as to we make the budget transparent, and we make sure that financial allocations of that budget are meeting what the community would expect. I think that would be a good area for us to focus on. Okay, so I don't think I have much more to add just now.
Last call for the microphone.
Yeah, online as well. I don't have much more to add.
Could you change the title of these notes so that semantic technology?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Actually, no, I can't. I think it's Annie. I'll reach out to Annie and get her to do that. Yeah, okay. Yes, Peter.
Something struck me in terms of other communities and other efforts. Who went to US2TS?
No, I didn't.
So it's the US Semantics Symposium. What's the some TNS. Anyway, there was a geo session in it, and it has been regularly. I spoke in it the first year. And so, the people, of course, like Torsten Harman, who doesn't come to this community, but goes to that community, and I think they're not like ESIP. They're not in there doing things. They're in there presenting their work and networking. But it's another venue that has attracted funding from the Sloan Foundation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
For example.
Yeah.
And their leadership of the symposium is now rotating, and the topics are rotating, and I think, if you wanted a venue to disseminate, it might actually be a really good one.
Yeah, I think it is. I've been cross-posting some of the stuff we've been doing over there, Peter, so I think that's an excellent suggestion.
So yeah, we had a conceptual, so as part of some of the vocamps, some of the earth science topics got presented there in one of the sessions, right? About how to do the conceptual modeling. And also there was some discussion about the formalism for how to do this bridge between, conceptual modeling, ontology design patterns, and then schema.org. So how do you actually do this in a more formal way as far as alignments? So I think that there's definitely discussion going on in that community, particularly since it's a more theoretical community in some ways, but trying to bridge the gap between the theoretical community and the people who are doing the implementation. That was, I think, one of the purposes behind it. So originally. So.
Okay. Yep. So we tabled that as well. The next one, that was in That happened in the first part of the year. Was it the first quarter of the year? I thought it was May or March or May or something like that. Yeah. So maybe we make sure that we get something on for next year. Okay. Right. Okay, folks, I think we'll call it quits for the day. And I think that basically signals the end of, am I correct in saying this, that that's the end of ESIP for the week? So thanks for kind of sticking in there, and thank you very much for participating for this session. I appreciate it. Thank you. Over and out.